If a human ever beats me, I'll marry him. Zayla laughed first, her voice rolling like thunder through the crucible, loud enough to shake the very walls of the Colosseum. The crowd answered with a roar so loud it felt like it could tear the sky open. On the blood-soaked sand, Zayla, champion of the Vorkala, planted a heavy boot on the chest of her downed opponent and yanked her twin-headed axe free with a spray of blood. The massive male beneath her groaned, his dark green blood soaking into the sand. Another challenger broken. Another promise of strength fulfilled. Her skin shimmered a deep blue, glistening with sweat and specks of gore. A body built for war, thick with muscle, scarred and honed, yet graceful as a dancer. Her mane of crimson hair whipped about her face as she raised the axe high into the twin sons of Vorkal. The weapon's polished edge caught the light and scattered it like fire across the stands. Zayla didn't bask. She absorbed. Every shout of adoration, every chant of her name was fuel. She fed on their awe. This was her domain. Victory was her native tongue. Later, in the victor's hall, smoke from roasted meats mixed with the pungent bite of spiced ale. Dozens of warriors in ornate armor toasted her name. She slammed her drinking flagon onto the heavy wood table with a resonating thud, silencing the chamber instantly. Her lips peeled back in a wolfish grin. They bring me champions from every star system in the hegemony, she said, her voice a low growl lined with amusement. Soldiers hardened in death worlds. Brutes carved from stone and thunder. But none of them last more than a handful of heartbeats. A chorus of jeers and cheers thundered back at her, echoing her dominance. She swept her golden eyes across the chamber and smirked. But now I hear whispers of something new, the soft-skinned ones. The humans. There was a beat of silence. Then the room erupted in laughter. Zayla's chuckle was the loudest. They say these humans are clever. They say they're persistent. I say they're fragile meat wrapped in fear. She lifted her flagon again. But I will make this vow. If a human ever beats me, in my crucible, by the sacred laws of combat, her voice rose above the noise, cutting through it like a blade, I will marry him. The laughter exploded. Warriors slapped their armor. Mugs clanged. Someone howled. A joke, clearly. A fantasy. No one took it seriously. Neither did she. But someone else did. Thousands of light years away, in the stale, recycled air of a forgotten fringe starport, Kale watched the scene on a flickering monitor in the corner of his rust-scarred cargo hauler. The image pixelated every few seconds, but the meaning came through loud and clear. Gods, the arrogance, grunted Bran, his co-pilot and a retired freighter marine. She thinks she's some kind of demigod. Kale didn't respond. His storm-gray eyes stayed locked on the screen. He had seen enough boasts before. They meant nothing to him. Until the camera panned away from the smirking champion to the silent line of attendants behind her throne. There, standing among the ornate weapons and golden trophies like a statue wrapped in silk, was a woman. Human. Her eyes sharp. Her hair the same black as his own. Her jaw set with a familiar fire. Kale stopped breathing. Mira, he whispered, the name dry on his lips. Bran leaned forward, squinting. Wait. Ash, is that? Kale nodded once. 8 years ago, Mira had vanished, taken during a pirate raid that tore their family apart. He'd buried her in his mind, written her off as dead to survive the grief. But here she was, standing like a ghost in an alien queen's hall. Kale stared at the blue-skinned warrior, Zayla, and didn't see arrogance. He saw an opportunity. A slim, blood-soaked crack in the wall of fate. A vow made in jest. But binding by the laws of her people. A door. And Kale, broken as he was, knew with chilling certainty. He was going to walk through it. The capital city of Vorkal was less a metropolis and more a fortress built by warlords. Towers of jet-black stone jutted skyward like the fingers of some long-dead titan. The air was thick with heat, noise, and tension, buzzing with the low hum of militarism. Kale walked among them like prey among predators. The Vorkala were massive, broad-shouldered, tusked, and powerfully built. He kept his head low, his coat hood drawn, navigating the streets like a ghost. Inside the Crucible registry, he handed over everything, the deed to his ship, his emergency fund, and a black market identity chip. The clerk, a tusked brute with one cloudy eye, barely looked up. "Human," he grunted, stamping the data slate. "You're assigned to the rust pits. First match, sundown. Try not to die in the first minute. The crowds get bored." The rust pits were miles beneath the city. A maze of sweat, iron, and desperation. It stank of fear and ozone, a graveyard of hopes. Kale's first opponent was a young Vorkala, eager to earn his first scar of honor. The brute was twice Kale's size and carried a crude iron club. Kale had only a standard combat knife and a mind full of tactical nightmares. The crowd jeered the moment Kale stepped into the pit. Skitterer. Soft skin. Snack. The bell rang. The Vorkala charged. Kale didn't meet the blow. He sidestepped, calm, precise. The Vorkala stumbled. Kale moved again, gliding over oil-slicked sand and loose grates. He wasn't here to fight fair. He was here to survive. He struck nerves, not muscle. Tendons, not bone. A jab behind the knee, a slash under the arm, a kick to the back of the calf. The brute slowed. Slurred. Then fell. The crowd was silent. Confused. He had won. Not with power, but with strategy. Far above, in a private viewing chamber, Dravik, the arena master, watched the playback. Unorthodox, he muttered. Like a scavenger. But not dead. He tapped the slate. Send the next one. They called him Ghost now. Not out of respect, yet, but because no one could hit him. Because he slipped through brute force like smoke through a grate. And because none of the Vorkala could understand how this thin, scar-scattered human kept winning. Kale bled, oh yes. Every match left him bruised, sliced, aching. But he was never broken. He studied the Vorkala, every movement, every stance, every flaw masked by pride. They fought like warriors from sagas, honor-bound, predictable, and bold to a fault. Kale fought like a shadow. He turned their rules into cages and then snapped the locks. After his fourth match, Zayla finally took notice. She stood high in her obsidian throne, watching a replay of Kale outmaneuvering a seasoned pit fighter. The human had timed a floor steam vent perfectly, scalding the opponent's leg mid-swing, then ending the match in seconds. Zayla narrowed her golden eyes, a small, sharp smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Clever for something so small, she said to her attendant. But cleverness shatters against true strength. Below, in the city's underbelly, Kale ducked into a neon-lit corridor, meeting with a fixer named Riven, a wiry man with jittery hands and eyes too alert. You're making enemies, Riven said, plugging Kale's item chip into a hidden terminal. The higher-ups don't like you getting attention. Kale said nothing. Just waited. Riven sighed and pushed a cloth bag across the table. Custom gear. Bracer with a hidden monowire. Magnetic boots. Smoke pellets. You're not here to fight fair, right? Kale checked the equipment, nodded once. I'm here to win. Riven's voice dropped. Tharn's watching you. Zayla's rival. Big brute. Mean. Sees you as an infection. Let him come, Kale said, his voice like stone. As he left the den, he felt the hairs on his neck rise. He wasn't alone. Not anymore. Two massive Vorkala began pushing through the market crowd after him. No markings. No challenge bark. Just silence and cold intent. Kale didn't panic. He vanished, melting into steam, slipping into alleys, doubling back. Like a ghost. The Crucible wasn't the only arena. The city was a different kind of battleground. In the pits, Kale kept winning. Each match added to his legend. He bled for it, limping away with bruised ribs, torn ligaments, and one finger that would never quite bend right again. But he won. He became a fascination. The crowd stopped laughing. They started watching. They still jeered his tactics, but the laughter was nervous now. No one could deny what was happening. The humans were not supposed to last. But Kale wasn't surviving. He was ascending. His final match in the lower tier was brutal. His opponent had trained with dual glaives and fought like a storm. But Kale disrupted the flow, slamming one glaive into the other, disarming him, then choking him unconscious in a brutal hold using his monowire bracer. No theatrics. Just a quiet, efficient end. It earned him his place on the upper tier. The sunlit sand of the Great Crucible. He emerged from the tunnel, blinking into the blinding light. The noise was unbearable, 100,000 Vorkala chanting, stomping, screaming. He didn't flinch. High above, seated on a throne carved from black stone and gold, Zayla waited. She was breathtaking. Her blue skin shimmered with power. Her crimson hair flowed like a battle flag. Her armor gleamed, etched with runes and victory scars. And her expression? Not amused anymore. Curious. Focused. Alive with war hunger. She tilted her head as he stepped onto the sand. He looked broken, bruised, limping, one arm wrapped, a gash on his cheekbone. But she saw something more. She saw purpose. Steel in his spine. Frost in his stare. He didn't move like prey. He moved like a predator who had done the math. Their eyes met. And in that heartbeat, the roar vanished. The sun faded. Time stopped. It was only them. Two apex creatures from different worlds. Measuring. Kale's breath caught when he saw Mira behind Zayla, dressed in ceremonial silks. She stood tall, composed, but her eyes flickered when she met his. She gave the slightest nod. Enough to say, "I see you." Enough to fuel him. His next opponent was Tharn. The Fixer's warning hadn't been exaggerated. Tharn was a colossus, clad in spiked armor, a massive morning star swinging from one hand like a casual threat. His tusks were tipped in gold. His glare was hate incarnate. "You disgrace the Crucible," Tharn snarled. "You dishonor her title with every step you take on this sand." Kale said nothing. He simply began to circle. Let Tharn burn his rage. Let him forget to think. The bell rang. Tharn charged. Kale didn't dodge immediately. He waited. Waited. Then dropped flat as the morning star screamed over his head. As Tharn stumbled forward, Kale drove a boot into the back of his knee, hard. Something cracked. Tharn roared, swinging wildly. Kale had already vanished into the pillars ringing the arena. What followed wasn't a fight. It was a lesson in control. Kale danced. He struck and faded. He let Tharn burn himself, each swing costing more, each misstep building toward collapse. Finally, Kale lunged from behind a column and delivered a punishing blow to the servo brace on Tharn's bad leg. The brace jammed. Tharn faltered. Kale didn't hesitate. He swept the leg and slammed Tharn's massive head into the ground. Silence. Then the crowd erupted, not in outrage, but in stunned, horrified awe. Above, Zayla didn't smile. She rose. Her golden eyes burned. Now, it was her turn. The day of the final match broke with heat already rippling across the Crucible. The twin suns hung heavy in the sky, casting long shadows between the obsidian walls. Kale stood alone in the tunnel, the iron gate before him sealed, his breath slow, controlled. His body was wrecked. Every joint ached. His ribs throbbed with each inhale. One arm was bound tightly to keep the muscle from tearing loose again. But his mind was a perfect blade. Across the arena, standing motionless at center sand, was Zayla. She wore no helmet. No crown. Just her armor, sleek, brutal, beautiful. Her blue skin shimmered with sweat already glistening. Her crimson hair was pulled into a high braid, a war banner cascading down her back. In one hand, she held her twin-headed axe, resting its obsidian blade gently on the sand. When the gates groaned open, and Kale stepped out into the light, 100,000 Vorkala rose to their feet. The noise that followed wasn't a cheer or a jeer. It was something, uncertain. This was no longer a joke. The human had earned the final match. The arena master's voice thundered from the speakers, "By right of blood and steel, this combat shall be to yield or death. No interference. No mercy. Champion versus challenger. Let the crucible speak." Zayla's golden eyes locked onto Kale. "You fight like a jackal," she said across the sand, her voice low, carrying despite the distance. "Cunning. Opportunistic. But the jackal cannot bring down the lion." Kale's voice was quiet but sharp. "We'll see." The chime rang. She didn't charge. She stalked. Every step was deliberate, weight balanced, gaze fixed. The axe spun in her hands like an extension of her will, a hypnotic rhythm of death. Kale began moving too, circling, reading the arena. He hadn't come here to match strength. That would be suicide. This wasn't a battle. It was a puzzle. The first swing came faster than any of her previous opponents could have anticipated, a blur of blue and black. Kale barely dodged, rolling across the sand, the axe biting deep into the spot he had just been. She recovered instantly. Another blow. Then another. She was relentless. Kale used everything, smoke pellets to blind her, magnetic saws to leap unnaturally off metal barricades, his monofilament wire to snare her ankle and trip her mid-strike. But Zayla was not Tharn. She adapted. She shook off each tactic, adjusting with frightening precision. Her fury didn't make her sloppy, it made her sharper. The crowd roared as Kale took a glancing hit that sent him flying. He landed hard, spitting blood. One of his ribs shattered. His vision blurred. But he stood again. Across the sand, Zayla's chest heaved. Sweat drenched her armor. Her arms trembled. This wasn't the dance she had expected. No one had lasted this long with her. Kale was pulling her into his war, one of attrition, of grind, of exhaustion. He needed one opening. He remembered a detail from his fight with Tharn, an ancient section of the western arena floor where two flagstones didn't quite align. A narrow gap. A trap. He feinted left. Zayla lunged after him, axe raised high for the final, killing blow. Kale dove forward, sliding in the sand like a soldier through dust. The axe screamed downward, and struck stone. Right between the two flagstones. It jammed. Deep. Kale was already moving, pain forgotten. He crossed the space between them, leapt, and pressed the tip of his combat knife, now gleaming and slick with blood, against her throat, right over the pulse. Her amber eyes widened. Her body froze. The entire crucible went silent. Not a whisper. "Yield," Kale gasped, his voice raw. The silence stretched. Zayla's jaw clenched. Her pride, her identity, warred with the cold edge of defeat. Then, after an endless moment, she gave the barest, sharpest nod. It was over. The wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a formality, a quiet ritual held in the arena master's chambers. The elders of the Vorkla watched in tense silence, their expressions unreadable. Kale stood beside Zayla, still wrapped in medical braces, pain etched into every movement. Her fury radiated like heat off stone. They exchanged binding armbands, rings were not used by the Vorkla. There was no kiss. Only silence and the cold clink of metal. They were now bonded. Consort and champion. They were escorted to the champion's spire, a black tower piercing the skyline. It was a place of legends, now their shared prison. Zayla's quarters were vast and cold, polished floors, towering weapon racks, dark furs on a massive sleeping platform. Kale said nothing as he dropped his gear in a distant corner and laid out a bedroll on the floor. "You got what you wanted," Zayla growled, finally turning to him. Her voice was razor-edged. "You humiliated me. Claimed your prize." "I didn't come for victory," Kale said. "I came for my sister. Bring Mira. She's free now." Zayla scoffed, a harsh bark of laughter. "You misunderstand, human. You are not a conqueror. You are a consort. What was mine is now ours. The girl stays." Kale's fists clenched. "That wasn't the deal. You have my hand," she snapped. "Everything else is now your burden, including my house." She barked an order to the guards. Moments later, Mira was led into the chamber. She looked from Kale's bruised, battered form to Zayla's tense, regal posture. Her face gave nothing away. "Mira," Kale whispered, stepping forward. "I'm here. You're safe. We can leave." Mira raised a hand. "No, Kale," she said, her voice quiet, firm. "I'm not leaving." He froze. "What are you talking about?" "I'm grateful," she said. "But there's more going on here than you know." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "There are dozens of us. Humans. Others. Taken by pirates. Sold here." Kale's eyes narrowed. "I'm not just a servant," Mira continued. "I've been organizing. Listening. The slave trade, Zayla's rivals, council members, they're part of it. Tharn was a buyer." Kale felt his stomach drop. "You changed everything," Mira said. "You're her consort now. That gives us leverage. Visibility. This is our chance, not just to escape. To end it." Her eyes bored into his. "I need you to stay." Kale glanced at Zayla, whose expression had shifted, just slightly. From fury to calculation. He had fought a war in the arena. Now he was being asked to fight another. And it was far from over. The champion's spire became a cage of quiet war. Kale and Zayla shared its vast stone walls like rival predators, circling, watching, measuring. They didn't speak unless necessary. They didn't argue. Their silence was sharper than any blade. He refused the massive platform bed, choosing a mat of furs near the weapons rack instead. A silent protest. A barrier. Zayla never questioned it. Kale's days were spent tending wounds. His arm, snapped during the fight with Tharn, was reset with a precision born from old military training. Ribs were bound. Cuts stitched with cold detachment. Pain was background noise. His focus was shifting. Zayla watched from a distance, eyes narrowed as he moved with deliberate control, adjusting his own brace, aligning bandages with the precision of a medic and the focus of a weapon. Vorkla warriors didn't tend to their own injuries. They had healers. Attendants. But Kale treated himself like a mechanic repairing a war machine. One evening, she trained. The vast hall echoed with the weight of her movements. Each swing of her massive axe whistled through the air like thunder before a storm. It was raw, devastating, beautiful. Kale sat silently, observing. But he noticed it, a hitch. Subtle, but there. Her left shoulder faltered slightly on the downward arc. He stood and approached. She tensed. Her hand brushed the dagger at her belt. "You've strained your Terry's Major," Kale said flatly. "You keep training like this, you'll tear it." Zayla scoffed. "What would a jackal know of a lion's bones?" "I know broken machines," he replied, stepping behind her. Before she could protest, his hands were on her back, clinical, steady, unshaken. His fingers pressed into the muscle, finding the exact knot. She hissed, her breath catching as pain flared, then dulled under his thumb's pressure. "Exhale," he murmured. She obeyed without thinking. The massage was not sensual, but it was shockingly intimate. Each press was calculated. His breath was warm against her neck. His hands moved with certainty, disarming, humbling. When he finished, the pain in her shoulder had dulled to a manageable throb. She turned to face him. Her golden eyes locked on his. There was no scorn in her expression now, only something raw. Curious. "You fight," she said slowly, like someone with nothing left to lose. Kale didn't respond. The next day, Zayla insisted they walk the lower markets, a public gesture to ease suspicions about their union. Mira had warned them to maintain the illusion. Kale was tense. His instincts screamed. His hand never strayed far from the compact kinetic pistol hidden beneath his coat. And then it happened. The shift in the crowd. The sudden silence before the storm. The first plasma bolt sizzled through the air where his head had just been. Kale shoved Zayla behind a market stall just as 3 more bolts shredded the wall. Assassins. Vorkala. Armed. Moving with ruthless intent. Leading them was Tharn, his leg in a crude brace, face twisted in hate. "The human dies." Tharn bellowed. "And the traitor champion with him." Zayla roared, drawing her warhammer. Kale drew his pistol and fired, not to kill, but to disorient. One Vorkala took a round to the kneecap. Another lost his blade arm. "Left alley." Kale shouted. "Funnel them." Zayla didn't argue. She moved like a landslide, hammer cracking skulls and caving in armor. They fought back to back in the narrow alley, Kale's precision and strategy paired with her brute strength. The chaos was symphonic. "High arc." Kale warned. Zayla swung upward and crushed a leaping assassin midair. "Shield left," she barked. Kale fired 3 quick rounds into the exposed leg. Zayla followed with a hammer strike that broke bone and shield alike. They were one. A machine of destruction. When only Tharn remained, he charged, howling, Morning Star swinging wildly. Zayla met him head-on, locking weapons in a brutal clash. Kale slipped to the side, took aim, and fired a single round into the servo joint on Tharn's leg brace. It locked. Tharn stumbled. Zayla didn't hesitate. Her hammer came down like judgment. The silence that followed was thick and final. They walked back to the spire bloodied and silent, but it was a different silence. Not hostile. Not cold. It pulsed with something unspoken. In the safety of the chambers, Kale washed the blood from his face. Zayla entered, equally bruised. Neither spoke. Then she stepped into the sunken bath, steam curling around her. Kale followed. The heat soaked into their battered bodies. The space between them shimmered with tension. She moved first. One strong hand brushed a cut on his temple, tracing it with surprising gentleness. "You fight well, human," she whispered. "So do you," Kale murmured. He took her hand, covered it with his own. And then they kissed. It was not soft. It was not tender. It was a battle. A collision of fire and control, dominance and surrender. Their bodies collided, tangled, wrestled, not in violence, but in the catharsis of warriors who had bled, burned, and endured together. Later, on the platform bed, wrapped in darkness and each other, they lay in silence. Zayla's voice broke the quiet. Tharn wouldn't have dared without backing, she said, her head resting on Kale's chest. He didn't, Kale replied, tracing the scar on her shoulder. Mira has names. Proof. Council members. High houses. Zayla closed her eyes. I used to think honor was only in the fight, she said softly. But maybe, it's in choosing the right fight. Kale smiled faintly. Then let's pick a big one. The council chamber was a blackstone amphitheater. 7 ancient Vorkala sat in towering thrones, glaring down. Kale stood at the center, flanked by Zayla, champion of the Crucible. Her presence alone was a seismic political statement. You accuse a decorated warrior of corruption, the eldest counselor thundered. With whispers and tricks. I bring no tricks, Kale said calmly. Only truth. He told a story. Of slave rings. Of stolen lives. Of Tharn's off-world dealings. Of council members profiting from the trade. No data slates. No files. Only language. Only honor. Zayla stepped forward. I fought him. He broke my pride. But not with tricks, with skill. With fire. He earned his place. She glared at the counselor Quran, whose name Mira had whispered as one of the key conspirators. You hide behind titles. He faced me with broken bones and won. The chamber fell into murmurs. And just like that, the old guard fractured. Quran and his cohort were arrested. The slave rings burned. Freedom spread like wildfire. In the weeks that followed, Mira led liberated humans and others through the ashes of the old empire. Some went home. Others stayed, building new lives in a world no longer ruled by blood and brutality. The spire changed too. It was no longer a prison. It was a command post. A home. One night, on the balcony, Zayla looked out over the lights of Vorkal. You've unmade everything, she whispered. Kale took her hand. No, he said, we remade it. And as the twin moons rose over the city, the champion and her ghost stood together, no longer enemies, no longer strangers. Just equals. Just beginning. And so it ends, not with the death of a warrior, but with the rebirth of a world. Kale, the ghost who entered the Crucible as a nameless, broken man, left behind more than victory. He shattered the very foundation of a culture that had once enslaved his people. And Zayla, born a symbol of violence and pride, evolved into something greater. Not because she lost, but because she chose to grow. She saw the enemy not as weakness, but as a mirror. Together, they rewrote the law of blood with one of fire, one forged in battle but tempered by something rarer, understanding. The Vorkala are no longer what they were. And neither is Kale. A consort. A warrior. A revolutionist. Their union, once a joke whispered through drunken halls, became legend. Not because it was forced, but because it was earned. And in the deepest shadows of the galaxy, across the systems where fear once ruled, their names are now spoken not with mockery, but awe. This story may have started in chains. But it ends with a choice. And a promise. The next battle will not be fought alone. Folded hands. If this story moved you, inspired you, or gave you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every voice helps us keep telling stories that challenge power and uplift courage. Until next time, stay human.